Central Intelligence Agency, Washington 25, D.C. Office of the Director, 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗏𝗂2809. Memorandum to Director, Psychological Strategy Board. Subject: Flying Saucers. 1. I am today transmitting to the National Security Council a proposal, Tab A, in which it is concluded that the problems connected with unidentified flying objects appear to have implications for psychological warfare, as well as for intelligence and operations. 2. The background for this view is presented in some detail in Tab B. 3. I suggest that we discuss at an early board meeting the possible offensive or defensive utilization of these phenomena for psychological warfare purposes. Enclosure: Walter B. Smith, Director. Problem: It is the purpose of this study to determine what concern to Central Intelligence Agency, if any, is resident in the problem of unidentified flying objects, and to recommend, if such interest is found, steps that should be taken to improve Central Intelligence Agency's intelligence position on subjects related to national security. Facts bearing on the project. 1. Since 1947, there have been about 1,500 official reports of sightings plus an enormous volume of letters, phone calls and press reports. During this July alone, official reports totaled 250. Of the 1,500, Air Force carries 201 as unexplained, and of those received since the first of this year, 28% unexplained. 2. The administrative unit now handling the Air Force inquiry on these phenomena is a small section headed by an Air Force Reserve Captain, 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗏𝗏𝗱𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 right field. It is from this call group that the controlling collection directive to the entire Air Force originated, and it is to this small group that the flood of reports on flying saucers comes for collation and analysis. 3. Research and analysis at this time is limited almost exclusively to the rest of page not decipherable. The 3 ran 0, 3, I team entered into its inquiry fully aware that it was coming into a field already charged with partisanship, one in which objectivity had been overridden by numerous sensational writers, and one in which there are pressures for extravagant explanations as well as for oversimplification. They consulted with a representative of Air Force Special Studies Group, discussed the problem with those in charge of the Air Force project at Wright Field, reviewed a considerable volume of intelligence reports, checked the Soviet press and broadcast indices, and conferred with 3 of our consultants at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, all leaders in their scientific fields. The present small-scale inquiry at Air Technical Intelligence Center, which thus far has been able only to use the case history approach, examining each incident carefully to determine whether it can be explained or whether it must be put into the unexplained category, was considered a perfectly valid procedure, but one that offered but little promise in opening up explanations regarding the nature of these phenomena. Our consultants at Massachusetts Institute of Technology told us it would probably be found on the margins or just beyond the edge of our present knowledge in the fields of atmospherics, ionospheric phenomena, taking into account the possibility that nuclear waste products might also be a factor to consider. A systematic attack on the as yet unexplained cases would contemplate a centrally coordinated program involving projects on a number of fronts and involving a variety of techniques not now used. 1. The problem of unidentified flying objects is a national security problem of concern to operations as well as to intelligence. 2. Operational problems are of primary importance and should be attacked at once. They include a. Taking immediate steps to improve identification of phantoms, so that in the event of an attack, instant and positive identification of enemy rockets or plans could be made. B. Determination of what if any utilization should be made of these phenomena by United States psychological warfare planners, and what, if any, defenses should be planned in anticipation of Soviet attempts to utilize them. 3. Intelligence problems include a. Knowledge of the exact nature of these phenomena, especially as regards 1. Whether any are susceptible to control, and thus utilized for other military or psychological offense or defense. 2. Whether any are predictable, and can thus be taken advantage of in military or psychological operations. 3. The reasons for silence in the Soviet press regarding flying saucers. 4. Intelligence responsibilities in this field, as regards both collection and analysis, can be discharged with maximum effectiveness only after much more. The end of the sentence is not complete. The problem transcends the scope of individual departmental responsibilities and is of such importance as to merit cognizance and action by the National Security Council. 6. Additional work, differing in character and emphasis from that presently underway, will be required to meet the specific needs in this field of both operations and intelligence. Recommendations. One of the two feasible courses of action set forth below is proposed. One requires National Security Council action, and the other requires action by Secretary of Defense. 1. National Security Council action. Under this course it is recommended: A. That the Director of Central Intelligence present to the National Security Council a draft National Security Council directive, Tab A, which prescribes that a centrally administered research program under Research and Development Board be established. In accordance with Section 214A, National Security Act of 1947, this program having for its research objectives requirements to be specified by the Secretary of Defense, the Director of Central Intelligence, and Director Psychological Strategy Board. B. That upon issuance of this National Security Council directive, Central Intelligence Agency exercise its function in providing coordinated intelligence requirements and intelligence support to Research and Development Board. 2. Secretary of Defense action. Under this course it is recommended: A. That the Director of Central Intelligence suggest to Secretary of Defense, along lines of the order that coordinated research program would be available to Central Intelligence Agency, and B. That a study is undertaken by Defense, that coordinated intelligence requirements be provided by Central Intelligence Agency before the study is started. Tab A. Draft. Subject: Unidentified flying objects. 1. The National Security Council has recognized as a national security problem our present limited capabilities in making prompt positive visual or mechanical identification of flying objects. The problem is recognized also as one which bears directly upon both offensive and defensive capabilities of the armed forces, as one of concern to operations as well as to intelligence, and as one having possible implications for psychological warfare. 2. As the nature of the problem is such that a centrally administered inquiry rather than a divided effort offers the best promise of progress, the Director, Research and Development Board, is charged with the responsibility of administering in this field a program of research which meets the specifications of Secretary of Defense as regards operational requirements, of the Director of Central Intelligence as regards the intelligence requirements, and of Director, Psychological Strategy Board as regards psychological warfare implications. Tab B. Draft letter from Director of Central Intelligence to Secretary of Defense. Subject: Intelligence interest in a study of unidentified flying objects. 1. Recently Central Intelligence Agency's Office of Scientific Intelligence made an inquiry into the possible intelligence implications of this subject. We concluded that while the operational problem of improvement in identification of phantoms was of first priority, because of the need to make instant and positive identification of enemy rockets or planes, the solution of intelligence problems are of sufficient importance to justify vigorous support by this agency of an organized attack on the problem. 2. In our inquiry, 3 of our men consulted with a representative of Air Force Special Projects Group, discussed the problem with those in charge of the Air Force project at Wright Field, reviewed a considerable volume of intelligence reports, checked the Soviet press and broadcast indices, and conferred with 3 of our consultants at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, all leaders in their scientific fields. 3. The present small-scale inquiry at Air Technical Intelligence Center, which thus far has been able to use the case history approach, examining each incident carefully to determine if it can be explained or whether it must be put into the unknown category, is considered a perfectly valid procedure, but one that offers little promise in opening up explanations regarding the nature of these phenomena. Our consultants at Massachusetts Institute of Technology told us it would probably be found on the very edge of the frontiers of our present knowledge in the fields. Part missing. Phenomena taking into account the possibility that nuclear waste products might also be a factor to consider. A systematic attack on the as yet unexplained cases would contemplate a centrally coordinated program involving projects on a number of fronts and involving a variety of techniques not now used. 4. As the strictly United States military operations problem of improved identification at home and abroad is closely tied to a number of intelligence questions, it would be advantageous to Central Intelligence Agency, as well as to the interests of the intelligence components of Department of Defense, if intelligence research requirements could be included in any organized inquiry into the subject. 5. At this time we know so little of the exact nature of these phenomena that additional research would be necessary before it could be said whether any are susceptible to control, and can thus be utilized for either military or psychological offense or defense, or whether any are predictable, and can thus be taken advantage of in military or psychological operations. 6. It may be found that an appropriate center for such research would be in a group such as Project Lincoln, which is now working for Department of Defense on problems of air defense. 7. At this time we are unable to find any basis in our information for estimating Soviet intentions or capabilities to utilize these phenomena to our detriment. The Soviet press has been silent on the subject, which is in itself provocative, and we are not yet able to appraise the present level of knowledge of Soviet scientists regarding these phenomena. 8. It would be appreciated if this agency could participate in any plans for further inquiry into this subject. Present status of the inquiry. Mr. Strong has discussed with you some of the general features of this problem, and now I am going to describe briefly how the Air Force has organized its study of reports on unidentified flying objects and outline its methods. The administrative unit now handling the Air Force inquiry on these phenomena is the Unidentified Flying Objects section of the Aircraft Propulsion Branch of the Technical Analysis Division of Air Technical Intelligence Center, Wright Field. This small section is headed by an Air Force Reserve Captain, 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏𝗏, at Air Technical Intelligence Center, Wright Field, assisted by 2 lieutenants and 2 secretaries. It is from this small group that the controlling collection directive to the entire Air Force originated, and it is to this small group that the flood of reports on unidentified flying objects, flying saucers, comes for collation and analysis. The strength and position of this central administrative group clearly indicates a low level of support, and presumably serious reservations in the Air Force regarding the value of extensive inquiry into the subject. Paradoxically, this central effort at Air Technical Intelligence Center is maintained on a minimal basis, while there is concurrently ordered a worldwide reporting system and an interception program which may expend hundreds of man-hours and thousands of dollars. The methods used by Air Force are now in the process of change, but the conclusions and explanations given to the public are based on the process I am going to describe. Research and analysis at this time is limited almost exclusively to the case history method. Reports, which are limited in their coverage to 10 broad elements of information, are received from the field, mainly through the Air Intelligence Reporting System, though also to a limited extent from the other services and from the Department of State. These reports come to the Unidentified Objects section, where each one is examined separately to determine whether it is explainable as misinterpretations of a known object, or whether it must be classed as unexplained and subject to further investigation. In this sorting process, the reports are first examined in the light of established and readily available facts, such as known balloon tracks or aircraft flights. The report may then be referred to an Air Force base or to the Office of Special Investigation for direct interrogation of the reporter. Also, in some cases the reports are referred to technical or scientific specialists for interpretation. It should be borne in mind that this is all on an individual case basis. There has been no systematic or extensive use of other standard methods of processing data. It is true that there have been a few attempts to examine some of the broader questions that have been raised by these reports. Air Technical Intelligence Center has, for example, laboriously gone through the accumulation of unexplained United States reports one by one to plot them on a map. These plots show a high incidence of reported cases near atomic installations and strategic air command bases, but this might be expected because of the greater number of alert observers in such places. Actually, a number of accepted research techniques that should be used in any effort to gain a sound understanding of these phenomena have not been employed. There is, of course, some doubt regarding the extent and kind of effort required for the future. The Air Force has not yet found any great cause for concern. Captain 𝗏𝗱𝗏𝗏 remarked that, as the problem seems to be of more concern to operations than to intelligence, it might appropriately be moved out of intelligence to some operational command. Within the last 2 weeks, he has tried, unsuccessfully, to hand the baby to Air Defense Command. Of the essential processes that might be used if Air Force considered the inquiry worth a full-blown effort, we could list the following. Research objectives should be defined in detail in relation to the questionnaire. The questions asked in the present collection directive are admitted to be inadequate even for the limited case history approach. Further, the answers are not processed in such a way as to easily permit the determination of the lines of research and analysis that should be followed. As there has been no preliminary determination of areas of most profitable research, there is no way at this time by which to isolate the important elements in each of the problem areas. No studies have been made, for example, to establish categories of the objects reported by shape, size, color, etc., or to show such things as shortest, longest, and average duration of sightings of objects of various kinds. These deficiencies have conspired against making cross-comparisons. There have been no studies, for example, that would compare certain weather conditions with the appearance of certain colors of lights. There are a number of standard analytical processes that might be used if this problem should be considered worth a full-blown effort. It might define in detail the research objectives to be used in relation to the questionnaire. After the areas of most profitable research had been determined, a logical next step would be to isolate the important elements in each problem area. A third step would be to set up means by which to make a number of useful cross-comparisons. Finally, trend studies as well as area studies could be made. Finally, there might be an objective study on the attributes of available data. In summary, the limited central administrative support given to the project by Air Force, coupled with the extremely limited scope of the analytical work done thus far, has placed a strict ceiling on the kind of interpretations that can be made from material now available. Trend studies as well as area studies could be made. There is now no picture of how the various phenomena may have formed patterns, either as regards aggregation or dispersal over specific periods of time. Finally, there might be an objective study on the attributes of available data. Thus far, reports themselves, not factors present within those reports, are only classed explainable or not explained. It is not known to what extent, or where, elements of consistency may extend through both the collection of explainable and not explained reports. Also, there is no means by which to sort out valid elements from otherwise unreliable reports, nor is there a means by which to sort out invalid elements from otherwise accurate reports. An illustration of a consequence of this limitation would be the probable unhappy fate of a valid report on what was actually an ionized cloud, when observed on a well-established balloon track. It would, in all probability, be classed explainable as a balloon. The relegation of this report to the explained category would take any valid elements present in the report out of the reach of later analysis. In summary, the limited central administrative support given to the project by Air Force, coupled with the extremely limited scope of the analytical work done thus far, leads us to believe that any broad conclusions presently drawn can be accepted only with caution. As to the future, a limited amount of improvement may be accomplished. A revised questionnaire, now being designed by Air Force and Battelle Institute experts, will give more detail to each case history. We have heard informally, though, that many objects are not reported in Korea because of the burden of required paperwork. A longer questionnaire would make pilots even more reluctant to report their sightings. Also, many cross-comparisons will be possible if present plans to use punch cards are carried out. In addition, improvements may be expected if Air Force follows through on its present plan to establish an advisory board of top-level scientists. Further, the current plan to place emphasis on using instrumentation such as diffraction grid cameras and new type Schmidt telescopes will yield more usable facts. The absence thus far, however, of a well-planned and properly guided research program makes it appear that it may be some time in the future before we can expect complete explanations of many of these phenomena. For the next part of our presentation, Mr. Durant will discuss some of the factors that have been found or may be involved in these reports. Part 1. Weather balloons. 1. In the analysis of 𝗧𝗏𝗶𝗁𝗱 prior to 1st of July 52, approximately 15% were classified as possibly or probably balloon. The basis for decision was generally little more than a form of guesswork, if the 𝗧𝗏𝗶𝗁 did not do anything, and much leeway was allowed for observers' fallibility, that a balloon could not do in maneuvers, speed, etc., and if the description corresponded even roughly to that of a balloon, it was so classified. If there was no particular reason to believe a balloon was in the area, the report became a possible. If the sighting occurred near a balloon launching site or on, or about the launch time, it became a probable. It was obvious that an effort to obtain factual data to support such conclusions was in order. 2. A 𝗧𝗏𝗃 approached the problem of weather balloons first. Weather balloons are of the following types. A radiosonde, rubberized tan latex, 6 feet in diameter at launch, up to 20 feet at altitude. Carries a transmitter and telemetering device for temperature, pressure, dew point sequences, which transmitter under certain conditions would give radar returns. Also carries a white running light during night launches, battery operated, which should last for duration of flight. Normal ascent is to 70,000 feet to 100,000 feet, at plus or minus 1,000 feet a minute, at which altitude the balloon bursts and equipment recovery is effected by a red parachute. B. Rowan, same balloon as above, but it carries only a radar triangle and is a winds aloft observation. C. Rowan sonde, same, a combination of Rowan and radiosonde. D. Rabble, same type of balloon, tracked by theodolite for winds aloft observation. E. Pibble, a rubberized tan latex balloon, 30 inches in diameter at release and 4 or 5 feet at altitude, burst and climb comparable to radiosonde. A winds aloft observation, tracked by theodolite. Carries running light for night launches. All types of balloons are launched at 0300Z, 0900Z, 1500Z and 2100Z daily. However, some stations launch 1, 2, 3 or 4 times daily, others launch irregularly, some launch only one type and others several or all. In addition, time of launch may vary approximately 30 minutes from the scheduled time, either way. All agencies which launch balloons are quick to admit that balloons can malfunction and that many are lost. In addition, wind currents at altitude can cause the balloons to assume odd shapes and strange maneuvers. The balloons under certain atmospheric conditions can appear to be almost any color, and may be visible even at extreme altitudes, particularly at sunrise and sunset, to an observer on the ground. 3. A 𝗧𝗏𝗃, faced with this situation, compiled in July a file of balloon launch data cards for Air Weather Service, Naval Air Weather Service, and Weather Bureau launch stations. In addition, this information is pictured graphically on the weather balloon launch location chart. Combining this information with the winds aloft data which Air Technical Intelligence Center receives from the facsimile charts has often provided a solution to 𝗧𝗏𝗶𝗁𝗱. Significantly, balloons, possible and probable, increased from 15% in June to 30% in August, with 24% in July. The percentage of reports analyzed as unknown decreased proportionately. This gain is a real one, and results from the accumulation of the background data and the elimination of guesswork. 4. The actual radiosonde meteorological information is extracted by all agencies launching balloons onto W-band 31A, 31B, and 31C for winds aloft observations. All agencies use W-band 20 and 20A, and these forms also include the track of the balloon. All agencies forward these records to the National Weather Records Center, Grove Arcade Building, Asheville, North Carolina. A 𝗧𝗏𝗃 has requested the commanding officer, Air Weather Service, which maintains a detachment at Asheville, to permit Blue Book to deal directly with Asheville. The intention is to request photostats of the sounding, W-band 31A, B, C, and the balloon track W-band 20 and 20A, at certain specific times and places. If this is approved, Air Technical Intelligence Center will be in a position to obtain these records for every balloon flight launched in the United States, from overseas American bases, and from all the United States ships and weather stations at sea. In addition, a 𝗧𝗏𝗃 will continue to use the balloon launch information available in this office, and will from time to time tell a typewriter, exchange service various launch sites for specific information. These methods of approach will solve the problem of weather balloons. Part 2. Upper Air Research Balloons. 1. Specially designed types of balloons are used by the United States Air Force and the United States Navy in cooperation with various contractors to obtain upper air data for scientific purposes. There is no doubt that these balloons cause 𝗧𝗿𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗏. Tracking data of 11 such flights in July resulted in positive identification in 3 cases, probable identification in 3 more. The United States Navy, through its field representative of Office of Naval Research at the University of Minnesota, deals with 3 contractors. The balloons released are large white polyethylene types capable of expanding to 100 feet in diameter and carrying up to 500 pounds of metallic equipment. Valve and inflation arrangements control floating altitudes. Naturally, they are visible even at extreme altitudes under many conditions and are capable of assuming almost any shape. The contractors often release from time to time free or attached clusters of the Ra and P-type rubberized balloons, as well. 2. These flights are often of long duration. One Minneapolis-released balloon was tracked to Cape Cod and lost, then it was recovered in Bordeaux, France. They are tracked by 10 radio direction finding stations throughout the United States. 3. A 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗏 has taken steps to set up a reporting system for all balloon flights of the Navy contractors. This program will be implemented 15th of October 52 and will permanently solve the problem of United States Navy upper air research balloons. 4. The United States Air Force operates 2 projects, Gopher and Moby Dick, which involve the release of the large polyethylene-type balloons. In all particulars, flight durations, tracking methods, etc., these flights are comparable to the United States Navy projects. At present, a 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗏 has no communication or liaison with these projects, but a 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗱 intends to use the same approach and reporting systems with the United States Air Force projects as with the naval contractors. Conclusion. By 1st of November 52, a 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗱 should be receiving complete data on all weather, Navy upper air, and United States Air Force upper air balloon releases. Note: this paper is a short introduction to the balloon phase of Project Blue Book. For anyone desiring the complete information, such as agencies and personalities involved, channels and methods of communication, etc., it will be necessary to read the following supporting papers which are on file in a 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗱. A. Balloon Data Folder. B. Miscellaneous Correspondence File, Letter 5th of September 52, to United States Air Force Cambridge Research Center, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Subject: Air Force Upper Air Research Balloon Releases, and first endorsement thereto. C. Air Weather Service Correspondence File, Letter 22nd of September 52, to Commanding General, Air Weather Service. Subject: Climatology Data for Project Blue Book. D. United States Navy Correspondence File, Letter 9th of September 52, to Air Branch, Office of Naval Research. Subject: Office of Naval Research Upper Air Balloon Projects, and Office of Naval Research answer thereto. E. Travel Report, Lieutenant 𝗬𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗏, 25th of August 52 to Washington, D.C. F. Travel Report, Lieutenant 𝗬𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗏, 15th of September 52, to Asheville, N.C. G. Travel Report, Lieutenant 𝗬𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗏, 30th of September 52, to Minneapolis, Minnesota.